Hey, welcome back to another interview. Today I'm speaking with Zack Hemsey. He's a well known musician mainly for his work online. He's got 467,000 subscribers as well as over 200 million views on his music. But beyond that, he's achieved success, outside of the internet. He had one of his songs featured on the Inception soundtrack. So he's a pretty accomplished dude, and it was interesting to speak with him. And today we talked mainly about compensation for creatives online. We all know that the creator economy is growing, but right now, the ways in which they're compensated are not particularly up to date. And Zach kind of talks through his struggles with compensation, particularly as a musician on streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, as well as the stuff that he's struggled with YouTube, and how, he doesn't believe that they're being transparent and particularly just in how they compensate their creatives. So for someone like me who's a small YouTuber, this was a really useful conversation. I had a lot of trouble as, a small YouTuber getting compensated, and he talks about the trouble that you get when you're a bigger YouTuber and you have, questions over being fairly compensated. So I found it to be super interesting. If you're interested in music, if you're interested in watching YouTube, you'll find it interesting as well. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. But yeah, man, I kind of want to talk a little bit about YouTube because I'm just starting, as a YouTube content creator. And, you're someone who's like, a pretty sizable YouTube content creator, especially in your field, which is like, I guess, Zack Hemsey's style of music. You're probably number one at making Zack Hemsey style music. But what was it like when you made the decision to go into YouTube full time?
Well, I don't really see it as being YouTube full time. I just feel like YouTube is one of many platforms on which the music exists. So, unlike stereotypical YouTube creator, they're making content specifically for the platform, and there's a desire or a pressure or a need to do that on some continual timeline, to satisfy the audience, to earn revenue, all the above. So there's none of that applies to me with respect to how I came to YouTube. At the time, I saw YouTube as being a platform on which people were simply sharing stuff. And there was a spirit of YouTube which consisted in my mind of, hey, check this out. Isn't this cool? Like, it wasn't really, I felt the initial spirit was not one of commerce. Right. It kind of turned into that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying that initial spirit felt more like community sharing, not about commerce here. It's about showing each other this cool stuff. And so it was in that spirit that I initially started uploading music to it. So I wasn't monetizing it. I wasn't doing anything. It was up there. And then as YouTube evolved, circumstances were such that I was forced to change the way in which I interacted with the platform. And if you want, I could try to flesh that out a little. I know I just gave it in a very abstract way.
I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. That revenue generation for especially musicians, I know is quite like terrible. I don't know if you've seen, there's some statistic where it's like, I think 80% of Spotify artists earned under $700, maybe even more. The percentage of artists who've earned less than $700 on the platform. So like the way I view YouTube is that compared to the money I make on other podcast sharing platforms, YouTube pays the best and it gets the most exposure. So would you say that's similar for music?
Okay, so I would definitely not say that YouTube is the highest earning platform of whatever, of all the platforms. Now, there's something to unpack here, which is you can compare platforms and say, I earned X on this platform, Y on that platform. X is higher than Y, therefore X is better. That would not be a compelling analysis, right? There's the total amount of money you might make on any given platform, but then there's also the terms of that earning. So let's say platform A paid you more than platform B, right? But let's say platform A pays you 50% of whatever gets earned, but platform B pays you 80% of whatever gets earned, right? What's the better platform? Well, platform B is the better platform. It has a better payout rate. You just happen not to have earned that much on that platform. So when you're comparing platforms, you kind of need to look at what is the payout rate? What are the terms? How these earnings are being divvied up?
Yeah.
That to me is the basis of which platforms are better than the other. Now, regardless of which one has better payouts, there's another component, which is, well, which platform has the greatest reach? Which one has the greatest audience? Which one will I have the greatest exposure? Okay, that's a different question. They may not go together. They may be a different platform. So when it comes to YouTube, I would say, yeah, they have a huge platform, no question. When it comes to their payout rate, I would say it's not the best. My understanding, last I checked, was YouTube pays 55% of earnings, but it's 55% of net earnings.
Yeah.
So basically money's coming in to YouTube. YouTube is paying off some number of expenses that I have no idea what they are.
Yeah.
And then after they pay off whatever their expenses are, then they pay you 55% of what's left.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of the current payout model.
And do you think that's fair?
So that's a difficult question. Let's ask, to answer the question, let's ask, what do other platforms pay?
Yeah.
So traditionally, like the kind of the most famous online platform that got the whole thing, the online digital revolution going, was iTunes.
Yeah.
Right. iTunes paid 70% of earnings, 70% of gross earnings.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when you compare 70% of gross to 55% of net,
yeah,
so very different things, right?
Yeah.
Now now iTunes is a download site, not a streaming site.
Yeah.
When you switch to now, let's say Apple Music or Spotify, now we're in streaming platforms. Well, what is the payout rate of streaming platforms? The answer is anybody's guess, really, because there's no transparency with the payout terms. There was a period of time at which Spotify advertised, we pay, I think it was 70%. I believe it was of gross, but I don't remember for sure. Then there was a period of time where you couldn't find that. They were not proclaiming that, shouting that from the rooftops. You couldn't find what they paid out. There was a period of time where Apple Music, in some article, suggested they paid like 71%. But if you go to Apple Music's site or you go online, there's nothing anywhere that tells you definitively these are the payout terms. And the point of that is to say, just because the payout terms might have been one way in 2014 doesn't mean those are the same terms that play in 2019 or 2021 or whatever. Payout terms can fluctuate without you even being aware of it, right? So when it comes to streaming platforms, there's a maddening level of no transparency. It's just this total lack of transparency that drives me crazy. And it drives me crazy because it doesn't seem to be driving anybody else crazy. I'm going, am I the only guy seeing this? This is madness. There should be clear-cut terms. People get caught up in the Spotify thing and they want to talk about things like, well, how much did I earn for this number of streams? And to me, that's the wrong analysis. The analysis is, what percentage of the earnings am I getting? That's what I want to know first. I want to know what certain amount of money is coming in. What's the percentage being paid out to the content owners? That's what I want to know. And if that percentage is fair, then it doesn't really matter what any given song nets me in the end, because I know the payout terms are fair.
Yeah.
Right.
Becoming established. Do you think, like, because that ethos of, like creative sharing, collaborative nature of old YouTube is gone, now it's like the big boy? Do you think that ethos is gone and now it's just like a corporate? Do you think it's just corporate?
Well, I think that ethos was never inherent to the company. I think it was inherent to the user base, right? Yeah. The ethos was coming from the users, not the company, in my opinion. I think the company was a company. It eventually got bought out by Google. Okay, but a company's a company. I mean, I think one would be hard pressed to find 5 companies that we would all collectively agree is like, no, that's just a legitimately ethical, well-meaning. No, the nature of corporations is to seek profit. Like, that's just the inherent nature of them. it is what it is, right? Now, it's not that's not to say I am not ruling out the possibility that you could have a ethical, moral company that didn't compromise its ethics in pursuit of profit and was still successful. I think that can happen, but in the landscape that we have, I think it's harder for that to happen. But in the case of YouTube, at least specifically, I don't think it was. I don't think it had anything to do with the values of the people who founded the company. I mean, maybe they would argue it did. But even if they did argue that they did maintain those values, the skeptical person is going to say, yeah, well, were they embodying those values because they really embodied them, or were they pretending to embody them because they thought it would play well in the marketing? And I don't think it has anything to do with the people that founded it or the people that bought it. I think it was about the user base. And even though now today, still, I'm sure there's a lot of people who maybe still look at it that way or appreciate it that way, but the nature of how they work now is different. So all that stuff, as far as I understand, all that stuff's being monetized now. Yeah. Even if you're not, and I think they got criteria that you got to meet before you can start monetizing. And I
just crossed it. So
and when you're shy of that criteria, you can't monetize it. But I believe YouTube still can now. I think that's the latest thing. So
you have 100,000. Let's say you get a video that gets 10 million views, but you have 980 subscribers. I'm sure YouTube's making money off of a 10 million viewed video, and the person with 980 subscribers makes nothing.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely, it's a different thing. And that's my way of saying, even if you had a substantial number of users who still adhere to that free spirit, no commerce thing, it's not possible to live that out based on the current structure of the platform.
Well, thank you for your time, Zach. And
thank you.
Nice. I learned a lot about what's going on with artists and YouTube, which I do think is actually really important. I think, for me, I personally felt it because I was doing, I only hit 1,000 subscribers 2 months ago. And until then, I wasn't making any money off of YouTube. My videos were getting tens of thousands of views, which, isn't crazy money, but it still is money that I'm just not getting paid. So I have a personal,
and you're starting out, right? And from what I gather, you just graduated college or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was class of 20.
Yeah. So obviously now every penny counts, right? Every penny counts. So it's not about oh, well, it's not really, I'm not making that much money. So I'm not, I don't have a right to complain. No. Every penny counts for you, buddy.
Yeah,
so it's
100%, man.
Yeah.
So I can just talk through what happened. So I had, the reason I kind of crossed this and my bump to my channel was I had one of the final John McAfee interviews before he, regrettably.
Yeah, I saw it.
So what happened with that was until I hit 100,000 views on that interview, I was unmonetized. And I only got monetized at 125,000 views. And now it's at 300, it's almost at 400,000. So I've made a decent amount of money from that one interview. But I think it's ridiculous that firstly, I don't get paid for all of the money, for all of the views that, up to 200,000 views, I don't get paid for that. And then second, I think exactly what you were kind of saying, where it's I was shy of 1,000 subscribers by 20, and for that whole period of time, I missed out on probably a couple $1,000s because of 20 subscribers. So I think that's kind of the absurdity of YouTube.
Yes.
But yeah.
And someone will say, well, then why don't you go to a different platform? And the answer is, yeah, you could, but you're also trying to go where the audience is. And I do think it's the case though, that there is nothing stopping you or anybody else from continuing to engage YouTube while simultaneously engaging competitor platforms that, don't have the audience, but maybe one day will. And of course, they're never going to have the audience if no one ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
the problem of life though, right?
Yes. But when you upload a video to YouTube, there's no reason why you can't simultaneously up that video to Rumble or to Odyssey or to whatever, right? There's nothing stopping you. And so
it helps build a, algorithm of just your profile on the internet.
Yeah. And so it's not impossible that the landscape changes. Also too, there's a lot of things in flux with respect to platforms like Google and YouTube and the immunity they have with Safe Harbor and whatever, all the social media stuff that's always being revisited both in the United States and European Union with respect to, are they a passive platform or are they a publisher or are they whatever? The moment that they start to unequivocally become publishers is the moment that they will lose their safe harbor status. And the moment they lose that, the moment they will be forced to alter the structure such that one would be able to opt in or opt out. And once somebody can opt in and opt out, then you have more leverage with which to, not the literal you, but the global you creator class has more leverage with which to negotiate and try to come to some terms that make sense.
Yeah. Well, hey man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really learned a lot, and I personally empathize with a lot of the stuff you articulated today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was I did not even expect that we were going to get into that, so it was cool.